Okay, go for it.
A priest, excuse me, a priest or a Levite who leased from an Israelite, just as they share the chulin, they also share the truma. But Eliezer says the masret also belongs to them, for they came on that condition. If an Israelite if an Israelite leased from a priest or from a Levite, the masret belonged to the landowner. But Mishmael says if a provincial leased from a Yerushalayite, the Ma'aseh Sheni belongs to the Jerusalemite. But the Chachamim say the provincial can go up and eat in Yerushalayim. If one leases olive trees for oil, just as they share the chulin, that they also share the truma. Rabbi Yehuda says if an Israelite leased from a priest or a Levite olive trees for oil to share half the proceeds, the ma'aseh belongs to the owners. Okay.
Right. So basically, they're saying that the effort that goes into making olive oil makes this a special case. So that so the Chachamim say that that here the Israel, who's the sharecropper, retains the right to give the trumas and masters to whoever he wants to.
Is it a special case just because it's one of the Shevis Minim, or
No, I think it's more because it's the effort involved in pressing the oil.
what about grapes? Or a special
Right.
case for that?
Yeah. Good question. Good question. It doesn't mention anything about grapes. Um, from the fact that it doesn't mention the grapes, I guess that pressing the grapes is, I don't know. You would have thought that if the Mishnah had meant to say grapes, then it would have said it.
Right, right.
But it says about this. Why? Let's see again.
There's a mentioning
Yeah,
about
it just says because chashivus or merube, because it's got a lot of chashivus, and he's not mevater on his chelik even in the masters, because so it seems to be about the value of it, perhaps because he's working on. I mean, oil by volume is more expensive than wine.
right, right, right. So, and in Mishnah Zion, there is a little mention about if you have a vineyard, and so we'll see when we go ahead. Another, not the same thing, but all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So now Mishnah Vav. Beis Shammai omrim lo yimkor adam es zeisav ela lechaver. A person may only sell his olives to a chaver. This is according to Beis Shammai. Why? Because when we're talking about the chaver, we must be being concerned about either Chumas and Masters, or we must be concerned about Tuma and Tara. Um, okay, so Beis Shammai holds that that a person must be. You have to. This over here is now talking about. If it was Truman Master that we were worried about, then the Chaver himself, the seller, could have has to take the Trumas and Masters before. So we're talking about Tuma and Tara. So Beis Shammai has a shita that you're not allowed to sell this kind of produce to somebody who might press them in Tuma. Okay, where Beis Hillel omrim af lemaaser, as you can sell it to anyone, even somebody who is scrupulous about giving Maser.
Mhm.
And so according to Beis Hillel, the reason is that that he's buying the olives for eating, and he'll eat them and he could eat them before they become mukhsha l'tumah. Okay. Okay. So even though most olives are not eaten plain, they're mostly used for oil. And nonetheless, since it's possible to say, look, he could just take it and eat it before it becomes susceptible to tuma, and therefore there's no reason for us to be machmir on him.
Right.
Okay, there are other mafarshim who said that the basis of the machlokes is that if it was the basis of the argument is whether it is permitted to cause tumah to chulin in Eretz Yisrael. And according to Beis Shammai, it's asur to allow chulin to become tameh in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore they said you're not allowed to sell olives to anyone but a chaver. Um, okay, because if he sells them to somebody who's not a chaver, he might come to make them tameh. But Beis Hillel say no, you don't have to worry about this. It's not a thing to try and prevent produce from becoming chulin from becoming tamei in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore you're allowed to sell them to somebody who is as long as he's ne'eman on masras, even though he's not ne'eman in tumah and tara. Anything else we want to say? Utznu'ei Beis Hillel, you know again Kedivrei Beis Shammai. But nonetheless, even though the pasuk the halacha like Beis Hillel, even the people in Beis Hillel, the people who are machmir on themselves, the Baalei Nefesh or whoever, they're called the Tznuim, the modest ones, and they were noheg like Beis Shammai just to be safe.
It's an interesting comment about that. The pious among Beis Hillel would go and hold on to Beis Shammai because of it being so makmir. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Zayin Shnayim shebatzruis karmeim lasoch gas achas. So you got two guys who have harvested their respective vineyards and they're making wine together. They made an agreement that they'll both contribute 50-50 of grapes and they'll sell 50-50 of the wine. Echad me'aser ve'echad she'enu me'aser. And there's one guy who's a chaver and one guy who's an amaretz, basically. He's so it's not that he's not. I don't think it's that he doesn't maser. That he is he's not ne'eman on masros. Okay, so he's an amaretz, and we're not sure if he's if he does take maser or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does the halacha say? The Mishnah says ma'aser es shelo vechelko b'chol makom shehu. And so first of all, he has to take maser off his grapes before he puts them into the vat. And his chelik b'chol makom shehu. So that's a little bit of an unclear statement what that means, but the Yerushalmi comes to explain it. B'chelko shehu demai, and his chelik wherever it is demai. Okay. All right, which means to say that that in addition to the fact that he took maser on whatever grew in his vineyard, or of his chelik of the grapes, he also has to take a maser again from the half of the wine that comes to him from the gut on as demai, right? The reason being because we're not sure which of the wine is going to be his. We don't. The commentary here explains that there's a concept of brera, which is sort of retroactively proving what was his and what was not. Right. In other words, you can't say huvrar hadavar lemafreya. It now becomes clear retroactively that everyone received his chelik, right? So let's just say if we could say brera, what would we do? We would take they would put all the grapes into the vat, right. And they would make the wine, and then each one would take out 50-50, and the guy who takes maser would take maser on his wine and say, okay, so lamaser, it turns out that the 50% of the grapes that were mine were the ones that made up this wine over here. Okay, and we can't do that. It's possible that that of the wine that he took out, some of it is coming from unmastered grapes. Okay, and since his friend is not trustworthy, he has to take the chelik of his friend that's in his hand because he has to take more masters on that because of Demai. Okay, there's a whole arichus as you see in the footnotes in the Kahati over here. Right. Okay, I don't want to go through all the lamdos over here, but basically the bottom line is that he has to take the truma from his grapes before because he's taking from his grapes and putting them into the vat, and then afterwards it's being mixed with his friend's grapes, which may not have been maser, and therefore he has to take maser again. Yeah. Okay. Shnayim shekiblu sadeh ba'arisos. Okay, two guys who are sharecroppers on the field. Okay, or sheyarshu, or they could be brothers who inherited from their father, or shenishtatfu, or they're two partners who joined into a field. Whatever the case is, they've got a chelik, so each one is taking 50% of the field. Yachol hu lomar. So now you've got two guys. So these two guys, one of them is a chaver and one of them is an amaretz. Okay, and the chaver doesn't want to start having to take responsibility for the masters of the amaretz because he's going to lose it from his share.
Right.
So what Yachol hu lomar tol ata chitzim shebamakum ploni ve'ani chitzim shebamakum ploni. You take the west half of the field, I'll take the east half of the field. Okay, and that's a fair division of the spoils because they're not. It's just I'll take mine, you take yours, and I'm responsible for my trumas and masters, and you're responsible for yours, and I don't have to take responsibility for you. Okay, ata yain shebamakum ploni v'ani yain shebamakum ploni. And furthermore, if the same thing with the wine. If the wine went directly from one field into the vat, it was a joint exercise. They both owned everything jointly. Then you can actually take the first portion of wine is mine, the second portion of wine is yours. Okay, and that's a fair division of the spoils because they're both from the same species. However, well, lo yomar lo tol atachitim v'ani sorim. Let's say they have a field, and they decided to sow half of it with wheat and half of it with barley.
Right.
Okay. So now, what he cannot do is say, okay, I'll take the wheat and you take the barley. Because being 50-50 partners in it means each one owns 50% of the wheat and 50% of the barley. So if he says, I'll take all the wheat and you take all the barley, then effectively what he's saying is, okay, I'll trade you my 50% of the barley for 50% of your wheat.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, which means that now the barley really belongs to him, but he's doing a trade with it and he hasn't taken master off it. He can't. Okay, you see the difference between the two. In the one case, he never had possession of the other half of the field, and therefore he's allowed to leave it for his friend. But in the other case, he owns 50% of the barley, and if he's bartering it for 50% of the wheat, then he's actually doing a trade with unmastered produce, which is not allowed.
So he has to master it first, and then he can do the trade.
So he would have to master it first, and then he could do a trade with the other one, and then he'd still have to take master off it, what he bought as well.
Right.
Okay. So, he cannot say same thing. If they're not the same min, then he's effectively doing a barter. So a barter with his business partner, with his brother, with his associate, whatever.
Whatever.
And either way, it is not permitted.
Now he has to master it. I'm sorry, he has to master it again because now it's his ownership. It's in his.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So he first has to master it before he trades with it, and then what he receives in return, he has to master again because his friend is not ne'eman.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me, my cat wants to get out. Have you met my cat?
No, I haven't. Gimel Vav. If one gives to his mother-in-law, he tithes what he gives her and what he receives from her, because she is suspected of exchanging what is spoiled. Rabbi Yehuda says she seeks to favor her daughter and feels ashamed before her son-in-law. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that if one gives his mother-in-law produce of the Shavias, she is not suspected of exchanging it and giving her daughter produce of the Shavias year to eat.
Right. So what we learn over here is that even the Amiyah Aretz are careful about Shavias, even if they're not that careful about masters.
If one buys produce from a person who is not trustworthy concerning Maasros and forgot to tithe it, and he asked him on the Shabbos who he may eat upon his word, after nightfall at the end of the Shabbos he may not eat until he has tithed it. If he did not find him, and the one who was not trustworthy in regard to Maasros said it is tithed, he may eat upon his word. After nightfall at the end of the Shabbos he may not eat until he has tithed, and Trumas Maisa of Demai reverted to its original location. Reb Shimon's
no. This is a new case. Trumas Maaseh. What's the halacha of Trumas Maaseh that fell of Demai that fell back into the Chulin?
Right. So it reverted to its original location. Right?
There's 1 against 99. Now that's the problem. Is it's 1 against 99, and it's not enough.
Reb Shimon Sisori says he asked him even on a weekday, and he may not eat upon his word.
Right. So he's saying that the Gezer of Demai, they built into it the heter that if you had Meduma, because the Truma fell back, the Trumas Maaseh fell back into the Chulin, you can go back to the Amaretz you got it from and say, listen, what did you Maaseh it? And you can actually believe him in order to nullify the thing, because Minatori in any case, Truma is batal in a majority. So you've got two Durabanans. You've got the Durabanan of Demai and you've got the Durabanan of Bittul of Truma inside Chulin, and therefore we can override that just by asking the Amaretz.
If one adores his friend to eat with him and he does not trust him regarding tithes, he eat with him on the first Shabbos, even though he does not trust him regarding tithes, provided that he has said to him, if it is tithe. But the second Shabbos, even if he vowed not to derive any benefit from him, he may not eat with him until he tithes.
And that we said was the chassan. That is having Sheva brachas at the Kala's house. I wonder if this mission is actually the makor for the minhag that the Shabbos Sheva brachas is held in the Kala's house.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I'm finished with that until the grandchildren meet Hashem. Right. If one died but forgot to recite grace, Beit Shammai says he may return to his place and recite, and Beis Hillel says he may recite the grace of meals where he remembered. Till when may he say Birkas Hamazon? Until the food is digested in his stomach. If a cup of wine is served them after the meal, and there is no other cup but this, Beit Shammai says he recites the bracha over the wine and afterwards over the food. Beis Hillel says he recites the bracha over the food and afterwards over the wine. Ram responds with Amen to the blessing of an Israelite, but one does not respond to Amen with the blessing of a Kuti unless one has heard the entire blessing.
Right, because you don't know what the beginning was of the bracha that the
Right.
Kusi made. He might have made some bracha to an Avodah Zarah.
But I think that halakha is still true if you walked into a shul and they were in the middle of a bracha, and is that true that if you didn't hear the beginning of it, or you don't know what bracha they're saying, you don't know what they're saying a bracha on for some reason.
If you heard the last word of the bracha of the shatz, you can say amen to it.
You can, yeah. As long as you know which bracha what it is.
Yeah, I think
Right.
Yeah, exactly, because you don't have to worry that the shatz said something inappropriate. If you know what bracha he made, you say amen. Yeah.
Right. One who sees the site where miracles were wrought for Israel says, "Blessed who performed miracles for our fathers in this place, a place where idolatry was eradicated. Blessed who has uprooted idolatry from our land." Okay. Yeah. Good. Nida Dalet Aleph. The daughters of Kusian are considered nidos from their cradles. Kusian men render a bottom mattress as tameh as that which is on top of a zav, since they are viewed as men who have cohabitated with nidos. Since Kusian women observe a nida period on account of any blood, however, one is not liable on account of articles that were below a Kutnin for entering the temple without tameh objects, nor does one burn truma because it became into contact with these articles, since their truma is in doubt.
Just a second, let's just see what's the reason with we said because they sit on even dam that is not tameh, for example dam yarok, and this is a takala because they think they're being machmir, but let's say at the beginning they see a dam yarok, and then after a couple of days they see the dam adom. They consider that as the middle of the 7 days. So then they got a mikvah too early because they thought that they began earlier, but they didn't.
Right. Okay.
So there is a great case of a chumrah that becomes a kula.
Yeah. But then they're in trouble. They went too early, so
that's
they're in
right.
trouble.
That's right. They went too early, and then they're still nidus, and that's why we don't we treat their men also as boile nidus. Okay.
Daughters of Saduci, when their custom follows in the paths of their fathers, they are like Kuthian women. If they separated from their custom to follow in the path of Jews, they are like Jews. Reb Yossi says the Sadducees' women's law is always equivalent to that of Jewesses until they separate from Jewish custom to follow in the paths of their fathers. Concerning
Machlokes Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi is the chazaka of a girl who's born into a tzduki family. Do we say by default she's following in her parents' ways until we know that she's done teshuvah, Or do we say by default we give her chizkas kashrus until we know that she's doing the same as her parents? And the halacha follows the Tanakama that we assume that she does what she learned in her parents' house.
Yes, right, right. Concerning uterine blood of a Gentile woman and toher blood of a Mitzaris, Beit Shammai renders both of these bloods tahor. But Beis Hillel said the blood of each of these women is like her spittle and like her urine. The blood of a woman who gave birth and did not immerse in a mikveh, Beis Shammai says it is like her saliva and her urine. And Beis Hillel said it generates tumah both moist and dry. Beis Shammai concedes concerning a woman who gave birth at the state of a ziva, that her blood generates tumah both moist and dry.
So just to clarify that, when we say it's like her saliva and her urine, those things are only matame when they're wet. When they're dry, they're no longer matame. So we see over here that Beis Hillel are more machmir by one level than Beis Shammai.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of the dam nochris and the dam tar shamotzaras, Beis Shammai says it's completely tar, whereas Beis Hillel say no, it's matame when it's wet. And the blood of Yoledis who hadn't gone to mikveh, Beis Shammai say that this is matame only when it's wet, and Beis Hillel say no, even when it's dry. Okay, fine. Kalim.
Kalim Dalid, Yud Dalid.
Yeah.
Regarding a ball or a coil of reed grass that were placed over the mouth of a barrel. If one plastered the sides, it has not protected the utensil until he plasters above them and below them. And the same is true for a woven cloth. If the cover was of papyrus or leather and one tied it with a cord, then if one plastered the sides, it has protected the utensil. Regarding a barrel that peels and its pitch remains intact and similarly contains containers of fish brine sealed with gypsum at the rim, Rabbi Yehuda says they do not protect, but the Chachamim say they do protect. If a barrel developed a hole and the sediments blocked it, they have protected it. If one plugged the hole with a vine, it does not protect until one plasters the sides. If there were two vines, they do not protect until one plasters the sides and between one vine and the other. Regarding a board that was placed over the mouth of an oven, if one plastered the sides, it protects. If there were two boards that do not protect until one plastered the sides between one board and the other. If one joined them with sinim or with shugmin, one does not apply plaster in the middle. It needs to plaster
Yes.
to
So
make
sitting and shugmin, we said those were like dowels or
Right.
edges, right? That made them slip into place very flush.
But it needs to plaster to make the seal. Otherwise, it's not sealed.
No, so no, if it's no, that's exactly what the last thing is saying, is that if he's made a dowel in between them so that they fit together flush, then you don't need to seal them in the middle.
It's tight.
They're considered exactly.
Right. The vines aren't going to do it. Boards aren't going to do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Baba Basra.
Okay, Baba Basra.
If one sent wedding gifts to the house of his father-in-law, even if he sent 100 manna there, and he ate their groom's meal worth as little as a dinner, they cannot be reclaimed. If he did not eat a groom's meal there, they can be reclaimed. If he sent many wedding gifts on the understanding that they return with her to her husband's house, they can be reclaimed. If he sent few wedding gifts on the understanding that she can use them in her father's house, they cannot be reclaimed. His gift is, okay. If one who was lying ill wrote away all his property to others, but retained some property, his gift is upheld. If
Remember, we just learned this. We just learned this in which Masechta? In was this in?
No wait.
In Peah. I think we did this in Peah. And we had a very, at least we had a very. It was a very similar one. He left over karka. That's the.
Right.
Yeah. Because he kept something for himself, we see that he didn't think he was really going to die. But if he gave it all away, then that shows that he thought he was going to die.
If one who was ill wrote away all of his property to others, but retained some property, his gift is upheld. But if he did not retain any property, his gift is not upheld. If he did not record in it that he was lying ill, and he says that he was lying ill, whereas they say he was healthy, he must bring proof that he was lying ill. These are the words of Rameir, but come and say one who exacts from another must bring proof. One more. If someone distributes his property orally, Reb Eliezer says whether he is healthy or dangerously ill, Properties which can become subject to a lien are acquired through money, a document, or an act of possession. Those which cannot become subject to a lien are acquired only through meshkika. They said to him, it occurred with the mother of the sons of Rachel that she was ill, and she said, give my veil to my daughter, it is worth 20 man. And she died, and they upheld her words. He said to them, and as to the sons of Rachel, their mother should bury them. The Kakaman say, on the Shabbos his words are upheld, because he cannot write, but not on weekdays. Rabbi Yeshua says they said it on Shabbos and certainly on weekdays. Similarly, one can acquire on behalf of a minor, but one cannot acquire on behalf of an adult. Rabbi Yeshua says they said it for a minor and certainly for an adult.
I think the halacha follows Rabbi Yeshua in both of these instances. It's a kal v'chomer, that if you can acquire on behalf of a katan, you can certainly be zocher for other people, for an adult.
Right.
Okay. Fine.
Yom,
And Yoma.
Vav Beis. He then came to the Higo designated to be sent away to Azazal, and he supports both of his hands on it and confesses. And this is what he would say. I beg of you, Hashem, your nation, the family of Israel, has acted wickedly, rebelled, and sinned before you. I pray with your name, forgive now that the wicked acts, rebellions, and for the sins for your people, the family of Israel has acted wickedly, rebelled, and sinned before you, as is written in your Torah of your servant Moshe. On this day he shall atone for you to purify you before Hashem, so you be purified. The Kohanim and the people who were standing in the courtyard when he heard the ineffable name out of the Kohen Gadol's mouth, they would kneel and prostrate themselves and fall upon their faces and say, blessed is the name, the glory of his kingship forever and ever. He handed it to the one who was to lead the Azazel. Anyone is to lead it, but the Kohanim, the Gadolim established the rule and did not permit Israel to lead it. Rabbi Yossi said it happened once that Arcela led it and he was a Yisrael. They made a ramp for it because of the Babylonians who used to pull at his hair and say to him, take and leave, take and leave. Some of the eminent men of Yerushalayim used to accompany him for the first booth. There were 10 booths from Yerushalayim and a precipice.
Up to the precipice.
And it was 90 rees, 90 rees, 7.5 rees to every mill. Okay.
Yo.
One more.
Okay.
That's it? That's it?
Nope.
Okay.
That's it.
I was thinking that Yom Kippur is really kind of to make up for the the Kate that was when they did the whole thing, Keda Egel, right? That was part of.
Well, the Chet HaEgel was when Moshe came down the second time.
Right.
Correct. And
what would happen
if
they didn't do that? There would be no Yom Kippur.
Hey, very good question. No, I mean, you could say that what would have happened if they hadn't come out of Mitzrayim, they wouldn't have had matzah, but Lot fed the angels matzah on Pesach as well. So it seems like there's some sort of energy that happens around there that determines that you would have to do that anyway. Even if there hadn't been a Chet HaEgel, we would have needed a Yom Kippur. Although, arguably, if there hadn't been a Chet HaEgel, we would have been returned to the state of Adam Harishon Kodem HaChet. Right. So then we wouldn't have needed a Yom Kippur. Perhaps. I don't know. We'll have to get Ari Barak to go and explore that possibility.
By the way, I heard my daughter lives in Silver Spring, Maryland.